Want your boss to put some real action behind the rhetoric when they talk about making your workplace more inclusive? Find out how to hold their feet to the fire to demand diversity on the Diversity Dude podcast with Reg Clark.
All right, so I am ready to keep this conversation moving. I have a very serious question, a topic that I want to talk about as a very somber anniversary approaches. I want to focus my next podcast on George Floyd. By hero standards, can he be called a hero, even if a reluctant one? Can he be called a martyr? I looked up the contrast between the two words, and a hero is a person for whom carrying out a duty is his or her creed. And a martyr is a person who takes up a cause in death and becomes the cause. So how do we define the man that became the catalyst in the face of a movement? The reason why this is important to me, because in previous podcasts, I had spoken about the importance of words and making sure that we use words correctly so that the conversation doesn't get hijacked and become something different. So how do we make sure that we focus on the real topic and not get sidetracked? And the one way that we do that is that we make sure that we choose our words carefully and use them correctly. So although George Floyd may be a hero to those that know him in his personal circle, I think when we move this conversation to a broader audience, we make sure that we try to find the right way to describe him. He's definitely significant. And by me saying he's not a hero or a martyr, that's not a bad thing. I'm not being negative about this. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to come up with a very positive way that we can keep this conversation going. If I call him a hero, and I've already done this in several groups that I'm a member of, diversity and inclusion groups, I threw out the question. Just a question. I just asked, is he a hero? Is he a martyr? And the initial response is quickly, no, he's not a hero. He's not a martyr. And so I gave him the definition. I tried to have the discussion. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to attempt to define, and I hope that you and your circles keep this conversation moving, and then that we can come up with the right words to make sure that we give Mr. Floyd his just due. So when I think about the hero title, I think about young Darnella Frazier, the young lady who actually filmed what was going on. That was very important that she risked herself. She didn't know what the brushback would be or how she would be treated by the police or any other group of people. For her to continue not only to do the video, but to follow up to the video by testifying in court. That's bravery. That's a hero to me. Carol Horn, Officer Carol Horn from the Buffalo Police Department, who years ago in the line of duty stopped an officer who was known for excessive force from using excessive force. That's a hero, in my opinion, to me. A martyr, Officer Horn from the Buffalo Police Department, her career, that was career martyrdom to me because she lost her career for doing what's the right thing. And so now we come full circle back to, officers who are doing the wrong thing. And so when I think about a catalyst is the thing that causes the change. And I look at the disgraced former officer, Chauvin. He's the Pontius Pilate of this whole thing. He's the individual who did a 9-minute crucifixion of an individual for no reason, and really got this whole thing started. And then you add to the fact that that COVID put us on a global timeout. We were all on a global timeout. I don't know what we did, but we got COVID, and it forced us to become a global audience. We had nothing else to do. We weren't going out, so we were watching the news in between our binge watching other things on the internet. But the news became a really big deal, and I don't know if I could stomach hearing one more time that you may not want to watch this video, or we warn you that this video is not easy to watch. I think I've heard that literally a couple 100,000 times. So the catalyst for it, again, was Officer Chauvin. An icon, I would kind of like the idea of an icon for the movement. He definitely, that whole situation with Mr. Floyd did create the tipping point. And the tipping point, if you ever read Malcolm Gladwell's book, is really about the moment of critical mass. So you got all of these factors lining up where we're on this global timeout due to COVID, where we're forced to watch TV. We got 9 minutes of video of this individual dying live in front of our face. We can see this going on. And that caused that critical mass, whether it be Black Lives Matter. Now, I just want people to understand Black Lives Matter was just one aspect of this whole movement. The movement was global and it was bigger. It was the tipping point of everything that happened in pre-60s to the 60s to the 70s and the 90s, all of the things that we've seen on the news, the reports, many of them unsubstantiated. Many times officers got off the hook. So this was a chance to really say, wait a minute, this is things have come to a head. Things have absolutely come to a head and we have to do something different. And George Floyd became the embodiment of Sam Cooke's Change Is Gonna Come, or Marvin Gaye's What's Going On. George Floyd became the embodiment of that. And so because of that, then we were forced into these discussions of white privilege and what it means to have white privilege, and better yet, the of being underprivileged. We used to think underprivileged, just a phrase that we use for kids and children in school systems to talk about their basic needs not being met. But now in a larger scope, we realize that I, as a Black man, can be underprivileged because I don't enjoy the same rights and liberties as people who look like me that come from different races. So we get into this really uncomfortable moment of making ourselves have these uncomfortable conversations. And now we're starting to see, I say this very cautiously, I think we're starting to see progress. I think we're starting to see movement that we've never seen before. I think that this was an awakening that was greater than any of the awakenings I've seen in my 51 years, or that have occurred in my 51 years. And I was really proud of the moment that we collectively have taken to really say that change needs to start and change needs to happen, and it needs to happen now. When I play it back in my head and I think to myself, my goodness, the sacrifice. And so while we may not be able to say hero or martyr, the sacrifice is real. Mr. Floyd's sacrifice is true and it's real. The sacrifice of his family, his young daughter, are all real sacrifices. So that sacrifice puts him in a certain category that we can't describe before. The idea that if you use the word hero or martyr, it's going to sidetrack conversations about the real issue of police brutality or equal rights for African Americans, all Americans at that fact. That's a very important thing that we're able to say that, all right, he may not have been a hero to a larger group, definitely a hero to his family. He may not be a martyr. And yes, he may be flawed, as we all are. So I think, the big thing is when people go and say, well, he was a flawed individual, he did drugs and he did that. Ask those individuals to share their backgrounds with you. What did you do? Tell me about your life. And, if it was perfect, all right, then great. But otherwise, let's make sure that we keep this conversation to the point. The fact is that he is an icon of a movement. He is the focal point of something that happened. And the Pontius Pilate of it all the disgraced former officer Chauvin was the catalyst that made all of this happen. So if people are mad about Black Lives Matter movement, if people are mad about the march and the protests in the street, if people are upset about things that are going on, they should write to Officer Chauvin and give him a big shout out for us. But they should really, really focus on the sacrifice that was made by Mr. Floyd and his family. And I think I'm just going to pay the meter and park it right there.
Tune in each week as Reg Clark shows you how to demand and implement diversity and inclusion at your job. To hear more, check out his previous shows on ShelettaMakesMeLaugh.com.